For more than a decade, Frank Villi believed he was under attack. Not by criminals hiding in the shadows. Not by a dangerous gang. Not by strangers. According to Frank, the enemy lived inside his own condominium building. He became convinced that a room located beneath his apartment was generating harmful electromagnetic energy, what he called dirty electricity. He claimed the invisible waves were poisoning him, causing headaches, fatigue, skin problems, anxiety, breathing difficulties, and a long list of other physical symptoms. But investigators, electricians, air quality specialists, engineers, and city officials repeatedly found no evidence supporting his claims. Still, Frank refused to let it go. What began as complaints to management gradually evolved into lawsuits, threats, harassment, conspiracy theories, and years of escalating conflict with the condominium board at the Bellaria Residences in Vaughan, Ontario. Born in Italy in 1949, Francesco Frank Villi immigrated to Canada as a teenager and later built a career in construction. Throughout his life, he suffered numerous injuries from workplace accidents and vehicle collisions. Over time, he became increasingly isolated, distrustful, and consumed by the belief that powerful forces were working against him. After purchasing a condominium unit in 2008, Frank quickly became known as a difficult resident. He argued with board members, accused management of misconduct, and relentlessly complained about building conditions. His behavior became so disruptive that he was eventually removed from the condominium board. Rather than calming down, Frank intensified his campaign. By 2017, he was fully convinced that the electrical room beneath his unit was destroying his health. He demanded expensive modifications to the building and insisted that management was deliberately ignoring the danger. When experts found nothing wrong, Frank concluded that the board members themselves were involved in a conspiracy against him. Over the next several years, his conduct became increasingly alarming. He wandered hallways late at night shouting. He screamed at staff and residents. He accused neighbors of participating in a plot to harm him. Property managers described him as intimidating and unpredictable. Several eventually left their jobs after confrontations with him. In 2018, the condominium board sought a restraining order, accusing Frank of threatening, harassing, and intimidating residents and employees. That legal action did little to stop him. Instead, Frank launched multiple lawsuits against the condominium corporation, management companies, city officials, attorneys, and individual board members. He claimed they were responsible for his medical problems and accused them of corruption, fraud, and persecution. The courts repeatedly ruled against him. Judges restricted his ability to contact board members. He was ordered to communicate only through limited channels. Eventually, he was declared a vexatious litigant, meaning he could no longer file new lawsuits without judicial approval. Yet even those rulings failed to change his behavior. Frank continued posting videos online, carrying signs outside the building, confronting residents, and insisting that everyone around him had been manipulated by the board. Meanwhile, condominium officials were preparing the next step. They wanted him removed from the building. A hearing scheduled for December 19, 2022, would likely determine whether Frank would be forced to sell his unit and leave the condominium permanently. Frank knew what was coming. On December 18, one day before the hearing, he uploaded a lengthy video repeating many of his familiar accusations. He portrayed himself as a victim fighting corruption and declared that he would continue speaking out until his final breath. The following evening, his war against the condominium board became deadly. At approximately 6:58 p.m., Frank left his apartment carrying a legally owned Beretta 92A1 pistol. He first activated the building's fire alarm, creating confusion and discouraging residents from using elevators. Then he began hunting his targets. On the 16th floor, he knocked on the door of board member Rita Camilleri and her husband Vittorio Panza. When the door opened, Frank opened fire, killing both of them. Moments later, he located another board member, Navid Data, and shot him. Next, he made his way to the penthouse residence of condominium board president John Danino. When Danino's wife, Doreen, answered the door, Frank shot her in the face. However, this attack did not unfold as planned. John Danino and several guests fought back immediately. They threw objects at Frank and managed to force the door shut. Doreen survived her injuries. Frank then descended multiple flights of stairs and continued his rampage. His final victims were board member Russell Manick and his wife Lorraine. Both were shot and killed inside their residence. Within minutes, 5 people were dead and 1 woman had been critically wounded. Police officers searching the building eventually encountered Frank on the 3rd floor. An officer ordered him to drop his weapon. Instead, Frank reportedly told the officer to shoot him. When he raised his pistol, the officer fired 4 rounds. Frank Villi was struck twice and died at the scene. The massacre shocked Canada and raised difficult questions about mental illness, paranoia, grievance-based violence, and the warning signs that precede mass shootings. Frank's daughters later described him as controlling, abusive, and prone to violent outbursts long before the murders. They said they had repeatedly attempted to help him but eventually severed contact. Although a small number of people sympathized with his frustrations regarding condominium disputes, nearly everyone agreed that nothing could justify what happened on December 18, 2022. One of the most important aspects of this case is Frank's apparent fixation on electromagnetic exposure. His beliefs closely resembled a controversial condition often called electromagnetic hypersensitivity, EHS, in which individuals attribute a variety of physical symptoms to exposure from electrical devices and electromagnetic fields. Scientific research has repeatedly failed to establish a reliable connection between everyday electromagnetic exposure and the symptoms reported by people claiming EHS. Many experts instead suggest that underlying psychological conditions, including anxiety disorders, depression, somatic symptom disorders, obsessive thinking, and psychotic spectrum illnesses, may play a significant role. Whether Frank genuinely suffered from mental illness, paranoia, delusional thinking, or a combination of several conditions, one thing became increasingly clear over the years. He was living in a reality that nobody else could see. As the legal defeats accumulated, his sense of persecution grew stronger. Every failed lawsuit became proof of corruption. Every disagreement became evidence of conspiracy. Every attempt to stop his harassment reinforced his belief that powerful enemies were trying to silence him. Eventually, fear, anger, resentment, and obsession combined into a deadly outcome. Frank Villi spent years claiming that he wanted peace, safety, and justice. In the end, he achieved none of those things. Instead, he transformed from a man who believed he was a victim into the very thing he claimed to be fighting against. A murderer responsible for one of the deadliest condominium-related mass shootings in Canadian history.